Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hoyer, I appreciate your comment, and I mean that respectfully. I would, and I don't want to get into the debate about marijuana and cigarettes right now, although I believe we need to be having some more conversation up here on this hill about the harmful effects of marijuana and the state's rights to circumvent federal law. But this is probably not the time for that. And so since I saw the word appropriations over the door out here, I'm going to try to turn back, Mr. Secretary, the conversation to appropriations. As this committee puts together a funding bill for the upcoming fiscal year, we're going to have to set priorities about how to spend the taxpayers' dollars. And importantly, we have to stick to the limit set for our subcommittee. With that in mind, I want to ask you about some of the ways HHS's budget proposes paying for its priorities, because some of those appear to exceed the principles agreed to in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The HHS budget also has mandatory funding proposals for things traditionally paid for with discretionary appropriations. A few examples include $1.4 billion for cancer moonshot activities at the National Institute of Health, $150 million for a community violence intervention initiative at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and another CDC proposal for $1 billion for vaccines for adults. Why, Mr. Secretary, did the administration propose these expansions to the mandatory side of the budget, especially given the warnings that we hear from the CBO about the projected growth in mandatory spending and what it means to our growing debt?
Congressman, thank you for the question, and clearly you've hit the ground running in your new committee assignment, so congratulations to you. Let me just use one of the examples, vaccines for adults. We have a program for children, Vaccines for Children program, which is very successful, and the reason so many children have been vaccinated and kept safe from things like measles and other types of very contagious diseases. That program, Vaccine for Children, is on the mandatory side. And it's because it is widespread, the utility and value is well known, and rather than have to go through the constant discretionary budgeting process of allocating money for something we know is indispensable, we considered a mandatory program. Vaccines for adults are no different. We know from COVID that if you didn't get vaccinated, chances are you were the one in the hospital or perhaps dying. We want to move that to the mandatory side because, again, it's indispensable, it's universal, and it's something that will not only benefit the individual, but American society. And so the purpose of moving some of these programs into on the mandatory side is because there's a clear value in not having to go through the yearly exercise of saying you'll allocate dollars for a very worthwhile purpose.
So to follow up exactly what would that value be? Do you not think that the taxpayers deserve to have this dialogue and to have the expenditures questioned year after year? Why should we just take for granted that carte blanche for perpetuity that we'll spend these mandatory dollars?
Yeah, Congressman, having served where you are for 24 years, you have that opportunity to have that discussion. In fact, you have the right, not just the opportunity, to actually change that so that it won't be a mandatory program or it will become a mandatory program. That's the purpose of these hearings and your debates. You all decide if it's a mandatory or discretionary program. We live by your direction, and we'll try to make sure that we provide the type of services that you expect. But honestly, the reason the adult vaccination program is not mandatory is because Congress has not yet decided to do so. President Biden has said, we believe it is now time to make it a mandatory program. It is worthwhile to do.
All right. Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment to the chair and to the rest of the committee that I would resist adding any more mandatory spending to our budget. I think every dollar should be challenged with every budget. So, thank you. With that, I yield back.